Guys, welcome back to the With Joe Wehbe Podcast. I would hope you don't mind today. I like to do what I don't do too much very often, but read mainly directly from the blog today because I thought I couldn't really add much more to this than the written version, and a lot of it is not even composed by me. It's in the words of Eduardo Galeano on a man who recently died, Diego Maradona, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, football player of all time, or soccer, depending on your part of the world. And the blog post is called Maradona and the Drug of Success, and that's something I've been exploring a lot with you guys recently. So without further ado, this part is in the words of Eduardo Galeano. He played, he won. He peed, he lost. Ephedrine turned up in his urine analysis, and Maradona was booted out of the 1994 World Cup. Ephedrine, though not considered a stimulant by professional sports in the United States or many other countries, is prohibited in international competitions. Diego Armando Maradona never used stimulants before matches to stretch the limits of his body. It is true that he was into cocaine, but only at sad parties where he wanted to forget or be forgotten because he was cornered by glory and could not live without the fame that would not allow him to live in peace. He played better than anyone else in spite of the cocaine, not because of it. He was overwhelmed by the weight of his own personality. Ever since that day long ago when fans first chanted his name, his spinal column caused him grief. Maradona carried a burden named Maradona that bent his back out of shape. The body as metaphor. His legs ached. He couldn't sleep without pills. It did not take him long to realize it was impossible to live with the responsibility of being a god on the field, but from the beginning he knew that stopping was out of the question. I need them to need me, he confessed after many years of living under the tyrannical halo of superhuman performance, swollen with cortisone and analgesics and praise, harassed by the demands of his devotees and by the hatred of those he offended. And now my words. Interpretation. To Maradona, one of the greatest football players of all time, success was a drug. Drugs are employed when we want to do something to our body, something that lies outside our own natural capabilities, or perceived natural capabilities. Maradona is not an isolated case. The drug of success is fierce, one of the most common band-aids to unfulfillment and meaninglessness in our time. The ultimate pleasure treadmill. The ultimate leaky bucket. I've said this before on the podcast a couple of episodes ago. We live, each of us, in two worlds. One is visible, the other is invisible. One is determined only by others, the other is determined only by us. One is the focus of the West, and the other is the focus of the East. Both are important. Both are different. And they are completely unrelated from one another. Success in one rarely relates to success in the other. Even when I read this, I think about that line about his spinal cord, and there's for a lot of very spiritual writers or philosophical thinkers, the relationship between physical body injuries and I guess metaphysical concepts and prompts is really interesting. It's only something I've really heard offered very recently. And it makes me very curious about the link between the two. How something that's wrong with us, maybe psychologically or just on a deeper level of our own whatever being, might manifest itself in physical injuries. I've also seen this talked about as you attract more hate. When you're carrying anger, you attract more anger to you. Like there's this unknown magnetic force operating. I find this an incredibly powerful little story because obviously Maradona died age 60, probably quite early, probably linked to some of his unhealthy habits alluded to in this article, but I wouldn't fully know, but I can only assume based on the information we have. And but I'm attracted to this idea of the fierceness of the drug of success and how it's often a substitute, and people maybe crave it when they do lack that inner world that I talked about a few episodes ago. When things aren't well in here, they try harder to make it look good out here. and bring that admiration. But then you also talk about in this article how unnatural it is and what a burden it is to have the disparity between what people think of you and how they revere you and the pressure, and then trying to sustain yourself as this Homo sapien with this outdated brain I've talked so much about, and so many people talk so much about. This was designed for a much simpler time and a much simpler social dynamic, the one we have now, where we are much closer to feeling eyeballs on us more often, more judgment, more thoughts of others. So it's just this very dynamic, very, very dynamic and sad story. And I think why Maradona is such a good case to talk about in today's episode is because there is certainly no higher high. Talk about the most popular sport in the world, and between him and Pele, it's its greatest pupil. And so it's not the degree to this external world success that makes it better. That's nothing without the internal. It suggests this frame of understanding around why focus on the external image if the internal is not at rest, not at peace. I wonder why we still struggle with this. Is it because most people don't realize that they can work on their internal experience because it's so much harder to receive wisdom and guidance on? Or is it because the dynamic we're in socially just gives you so many more obstacles than it does aids and assistance? And is it just an environment that makes it incredibly difficult to thrive internally? Something I was reading last night was that it was a recount from an older American Indian talking about how white people seem to have a lot more stress and very strained expressions on their faces, like they're always struggling with something. And it just goes to show the complexity of modern life. The more intricate it gets, perhaps the more burdensome. Anyway, hopefully on this podcast we help give you the tools to survive and thrive despite the fact that we're in a socially more complex and economically more complex time, and trying to work together to find solutions. But taking the drug of success is just like taking any other drug. Limited utility. I wonder if you can reflect on, as your question for the day, how someone like Maradona would have dealt with this in a better way. Not to judge, not from a judgmental place, but what action or course would have been taken instead to get back on track? Thanks for joining me today on the With Joe Wehbe podcast. We'll be back again tomorrow. In the meantime, remember that the best way to open 1,000 doors for you is to concentrate on opening doors for others.